with one of them, I see a guy in his blind spot pull a knife. So you already know. And in that resulted with Korean police showed up. One of the three that was injured was the son of a Korean dignitary. He appreciates our service for our country. He appreciates the fact that we're serving there and protecting him and his family. And he says, well, PTSD says I'm not safe. Moral injury says I'm no good. PTSD is a mental, it's a fear-based thing. Moral injury is a trust-based. It's a broken connection thing. Like, you know, it's very shame-based.
All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Eagle Ops Rally Point podcast. And we are here today with one of our amazing community partners and one of my dearest friends, Dr. Carter Check. And man, I could go on with a bio a mile long, but I'm gonna let Dr. Carter Check kind of tell us more about himself and his current situation. So what are you doing? Great bio as far as the VA side of things, a chaplain, and in the process of a book and multiple books. And yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's good to be here with you, Shep. And you are right. We are dear friends. And that's really probably the coolest thing about this relationship is when I first moved here from Nashville working with the VA, I was looking for different veteran service organizations where I could show up and not be Dr. Carter Check, but just be Carter. Because even, you know, working in the profession, working with first responders, working with veterans on a daily basis, you need that space for yourself. Right. And I found Eagle Ops, and I'm super grateful for that. So we were friends well before we were partners, which I think makes this even more powerful, you know. Absolutely. So what have I been up to? Yeah. Man, lots we got enough time here. You know, I think it has to go back to adverse childhood experiences, you know, growing up in a home where there was some abuse and just learning that the outdoors always provided something that was tangible, something you could show up to that would show up where you are. So my dad's retired Navy. He always says, well, why'd you go Army? I said, well, you know, I never grew up playing Navy. I always grew up playing Army. And so when it was time for me to kind of grow up and get out of the house, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go into the Army. And so I chose to be a Cav Scout. And that took me to my first duty station over in South Korea. When I got there, my unit was out in the field and they were Op 4 at like the stand-up National Training Center that they have there. So I went immediately into the field, and you know how it is when you get into the field with your brothers, it's like instant camaraderie. And I'll never forget meeting Olin, who was from Georgia. He instantly became my battle buddy. He was my sniper partner. We went through the stand-up sniper school together. So we were not just both from Georgia, not just both in the Army, not just both Cav Scouts. We had each other's back. Right. And so after about 2 months out in the field, we come back to station, and the platoon sergeant's getting ready to PCS. He's leaving to go to another station. So that's always a big get together, meal, party, you know. So here I am, 18 years old on the other side of the world, celebrating a platoon sergeant that's getting ready to go. And I'm out in an area off Camp Casey where they block off the streets. There's so many people who are in that area. There's so many restaurants and bars and clubs just condensed that they block the streets off. And of course, you got to get back on post before 3, right? So about 2:30, we're looking at the clocks and got to head back towards the post, and we're probably about 20 minutes from it and got about a 30-minute walk. And as we're walking, this car comes zipping through this no-drive area and about runs us over. Now, you don't have to know another language in another country to understand there's certain gestures you can offer each other that lets you know you're not really happy with one another. And so we exchanged some of that, and I was newly in the country, so I didn't really know the language, but Olin did. And what ended up happening was 7 Korean nationals surrounded us in the street. And as Olin is arguing with one of them, I see a guy in his blind spot pull a knife. And so you already know.
Right.
Took him out. And in that resulted with 3 of them being hospitalized. Korean police showed up. They were able to grab Olin. The MPs were able to snag me before the Korean police got me. But the shakeup was one of the 3 that was injured was the son of a Korean dignitary. So the Army, from division level, offered us up to be prosecuted for assault and battery. And so here I am, wearing an American uniform, serving my country, protecting their country. And now for political reasons, it seems, I'm being prosecuted for a life sentence in prison because I did the right thing. And that really did a number to me. You know, how often do you get in trouble for doing the right thing? Right. Well, now later in life, I realize there's a lot of veterans who feel the same way.
Right.
They did the right thing, but something just is unsettled in them. We'll get to that in a minute, you know. But for me, I broke my wrist in that altercation. The next morning, I realized that and went down to the hospital and got a cast and was in it for 6 months. You know, as a cast from here and for 2 months, and then from here,
right.
and then from here. And I was always like, hey, just make sure my trigger finger's set, you know, doc, I need to use that. And that afternoon, so Friday night's when it happened. Saturday morning, I'm getting casted. Saturday afternoon, I'm down at battalion in front of the colonel, in front of the sergeant major, and they're kind of laying out like the severity of this thing to us. And by the time Saturday night rolls around, I'm sitting in my hooch and I'm thinking, man, we're guilty. I threw the first punch. And if the Army's not sticking by our side, I mean, we're done. Like, nobody's fighting for us. Then, so here I am on the other side of the world. I'm thinking, what are they going to do to an American soldier in a Korean prison the rest of my life? I'm 18. I'm thinking about my mom's scrambled eggs with cheese that I'm never going to get to eat again. You know, you're not thinking too far ahead, but I'm thinking maybe it might not be a bad idea if I go up to the top of this roof and just step off. And I remember sitting there and I thought, I'm going to go call my mom before I do something. And so I went down to the end of the hallway. I got on the phone. You know, back then you got the calling card. So I'm dialing in the numbers. My mom answers, and I tell her everything that's going on. And it's the first time in my life. Now, I didn't grow up in a home where we attended church often. You know, religion wasn't like a thing in my house where I grew up, where it's something we do every Sunday or anything like that. But what I did grow up was in a home where my mom every morning would be reading her Bible at the table. But it didn't matter if it was in the morning or late at night and I came home high or stoned or drunk when I was a teenager. She would always immediately just kind of stop what she was doing, stop reading her Bible, stop whatever, and say, honey, are you hungry? Do you want a grilled cheese? Like, that was the love that I got. And so I never got like, you should be reading your Bible, you should go to church, or any of that type of stuff that I know a lot of people grow up around religion really experience that type. But I didn't have that. I'd say I grew up in a great home. My dad was awesome. My dad wasn't an abuser, just so everybody's listening. He wasn't the one giving me abuse. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd say it was an all-American home. But there I am on the other side of the world. I'm telling my mom, and she goes, for the first time, she goes, son, I can't help you, but I believe God can. You need to know God. And I remember sitting there, Shep, and on the bulletin board right there by the phone was like this list of all these chapel services. You know, you got your Catholic service, you got your Presbyterian service, you got your Protestant service, you know, all this. Right. And I remembered back in the day when I was a teenager, like, people were associated with these certain ones, and man, they were drinking and getting higher than I was. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to that one, hypocrites, you know, like this. But there was one that said Kojic. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that is. Cogic. I'm like, I'm going to go to this one because I didn't know what it was. Well, when I showed up the next morning at that service, I was the only white boy in an all-black Pentecostal service, which was totally cool. I grew up in Atlanta. Right. My best friend was black, so it was good. Yeah. I mean, I didn't feel out of place at all because I had one thing on my mind. I needed to meet the God that my mom said. And I did. I did that morning, which kind of set me on this trajectory of just relationship with God, finding purpose outside of my pain. And I didn't realize how important that would be to me in the long history of my life, right? We ended up 9 months later going to court again. I would go every month. I would go once a month for like 9 months.
Right.
And you ever know when you're watching the football game and it's like at the end of the game and your team's down, but you're getting ready to kick a field goal, and then your team kicks the field goal and you're going crazy. You're like, yes, we're ahead. We're going to win because time's going to run out. And then all of a sudden they recognize there's a flag on the play.
Yeah.
And you go to the highest of high and the lowest of low. Well, the reason I say that is when we were sitting there, I couldn't understand the language in the courtroom, but I could understand excitement and tone. And I knew when the jury read the verdict, we were guilty because the side that was against us, they just kicked the field goal.
Right, yeah.
But then when the judge started talking in Korean, you could tell that there was a flag on the play because their elation and their, excitement now is turning. And, from someone I know, I've been around you and Jessica enough to know that sometimes you can just give each other looks and you know what the conversations already is, right? Well, I remember looking at Olin when the verdict first ran, and I was like, we're screwed.
We're screwed.
And then you notice there's a flag on the play, right? When the judge starts talking, and I look at him and I'm like, something's up here. Well, then the judge starts talking to us in English.
Oh, wow.
And he tells us that he appreciates our service for our country. He appreciates the fact that we're serving there and protecting him and his family. And he says he's not going to send us to prison for the rest of our life. But what he is going to do is he's going to bar us from ever coming back after we PCS. So I have an active JAG order right now to not be able to go to South Korea. And I didn't think that was a big deal for the whole entirety of my life until like 3 years ago when my oldest son, who's a Calf Scout in the Army active right now, was serving at Camp Casey. And I thought,
I can't
how
go see him.
cool would it be to go visit him, but I can't.
Right.
And so even then I realized years of processing and dealing with that experience and the pain of that you don't always heal from it. Like there's always residue that you got to deal with. And you know what? You got to be prepared for that type of stuff later in life, right? I think the part of that story that probably affects me the most is when I came back stateside after the cast, after the court, after the injury, I ended up with a profile. You can imagine the atrophy in my wrist after 6 months in a cast. I couldn't do a military issue push-up. And when I came back stateside, nobody knew my story. Nobody knew my history. Nobody cared. They just saw a soldier who couldn't do a PT test.
Right.
So I got the
PT
the defunct,
right.
And so I got all the crappy guard, burn barrel, burn crap, guard duty, all of that. Not to mention, when we were in Korea, every time we had a weekend formation, the sergeant major would put me and Olin up in the front of the formation and be like, don't be like checking banks. Which was, now that I think back on that, was like, bro, that's
we were taking
not cool, other. Right?
Yeah,
And again, I'm sitting there thinking, if I hadn't done what I'd done, Olin would be dead. He'd have took a knife to the neck. And you're going to stand us up in front of the formation and like haze us or belittle us for that? Yeah, so that went on. But when I came back stateside, nobody knew my story. Now it really started to enforce this thing of like unworthiness. And look, there's a lot of things that a lot of people have done in service that are far worse than what I'm talking about I experienced, kill a kid. Well, the kid was armed. Well, it doesn't matter. It was a kid, right? And things like that. So that's my moral injury story. That was my story of an experience making me feel unworthy. So fast forward, married, busy, kids, and the weight of it, the weight of the misunderstanding starts to catch up to you. Mm-hmm. Now you can try to forget a whole lot, but forgetting is worse than remembering because it doesn't happen. Not only deal with the anxiety of trying to forget, you deal with the anxiety of that you're still remembering the whole thing.
And it comes back in the worst times.
Oh, the worst times, right? And so after a divorce, displacement from my kids, here I am alone in the best sense of things, And at the time I was in banking and finance. I grabbed a profession that kept me super busy. It kept me in sales. It kept me high performing, right? Because that's how a lot of us high performers hide things, is in busyness.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had this, I guess, an unsettling mindset of I'm either about to be really destructive or I can be really constructive. And so I sat down and I started looking at like different programs for veterans. I found Voc Rehab, great program for veterans who have a service-connected disability, which I did from my injury,
Right.
from my, once I didn't go to prison, it became a training incident. So my little 20%, qualified me for that. And so I decided I was going to go to grad school. So I did. I went to seminary because even though I had really tried to run from the God that I was introduced to when I was in South Korea, right? That helped me, out of the mindset of going to prison, not even just in my mind, in the natural, right? There was a period of time there where I was like, I don't know if I really want to be sold out in this because, I want to live my life the way.
I was about to say it's a lot easier to do the other.
Yeah, I want to live my life the way I want to, right?
Right.
And what I found out is my God can be a little bit tricky in the sense of, a creek will dry up, so you'll go look for water somewhere else, right? And no, I'm not saying that my divorce happened because of God or any of that. What I'm saying is there comes a point in your life where you feel like you're missing something. And there's something greater than you that will help you find that, which is probably nature. If I'm gonna really go after something, it's the outdoors. It's gonna do that.
Right.
But in that season, I decided I was gonna take a little concentration in counseling because maybe I could find out something about myself. Maybe I could help my kids through a transition. And what ended up happening was a clinical residency at a level 1 trauma hospital. And I really figured out for the first time in my life that I was designed for crisis. That there was something within me that cried out for extreme situations. So it wasn't like, I woke up one day realizing after, several decades from that incident happening to me that I was designed to sit with people in their worst moments. But I was slow walking towards that. And what I found was my greatest pains were connected to my greatest purpose. I just had to lean into it.
Mm.
Right? And so that led into graduate school, more degrees, doctoral degree at Vanderbilt in integrative chaplaincy, where I wrote a dissertation about outdoors, and a couple of clinical residencies at the VA. And I really figured out, man, that my calling and my purpose in life was to connect with vets and first responders in some of their worst moments, and not to fix them, but to be present with them. Because when you're hurting, you need someone to show up.
Totally agree with that one. For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously so currently today you are like, tell me about yourself as far as where you at, what you're doing, that kind of stuff. That way we have some kind of context on our partnership, and it'll relate obviously heavily to the Eagle Ops Foundation and kind of lead into both of our passions, you know, as far as that goes.
Yeah. So in March of 2017, I left a clinical residency at the Nashville VA Medical Center and took a full-time job as a clinical chaplain at the Eastern Oklahoma VA Medical Center, which is where I am today. I've been there for going on 11 years. When I was in Nashville, I helped create a workbook that we use in the VA for veterans who have experienced moral injury. And I co-created that with a team out of the Memphis VA when I was in the Nashville VA, a team of mental health professionals. So everything I do is really integrative work, meaning I think the work around moral injury and suicidality takes a all hands on deck approach. So you need the assistance of, even though I'm a clinical chaplain and an ethicist, I deal with I'm on the co-chair of the ethics committee at our hospital. you need that mental health and that behavioral health eye
Right.
to a lot of things, because it's very complex. A lot of the things that I always say, the worst things that veterans deal with are losses that don't have funerals. They're unseen wounds that don't show up on MRIs or even measures, right?
Right.
There's such a focus in a lot of the scientific models of care that focus on symptomology, like anxiety, depression, PTSD. Now, don't hear me say these things aren't important. They are. You and I both deal with some of those, right? We're dealing with them right now. But at the end of the day, the things that people struggle with the most, they don't come up on scans.
Right.
Helplessness, hopelessness, unworthiness, right? How do you measure those? Where do they show up? And so for me, as I was struggling in my moral injury, when I went to the VA in 2006, nobody even was talking about this. And they kept trying to tell me, you have PTSD. And I'd be like, yeah, I do. Okay. But
that doesn't mean
that's not what I'm suffering with, and people, a lot of folks will say, well, what's the difference between PTSD and moral injury? Okay.
I was about to ask you the same question.
PTSD says I'm not safe. Moral injury says I'm no good. PTSD is it's a fear-based thing. Moral injury is a trust-based. It's a broken connection thing. Like, it's very shame-based. So for me, when I was suffering with mine, look, I had a lot of people that I served with that served longer, because by the time I was ready to get out, my experience, I was done. There was no re-enlistment for me. And so a bit of a loss for me, remember, it's the losses that don't have funerals, which is why a lot of veterans who transition to the civilian world, there's not a funeral for that. Usually a retirement party or something like that, right? But it really should be a funeral because it's a moment of death, right?
For sure.
And I really struggled with, well, I didn't serve in a sustained combat situation. So, a lot of times we feel like we're less of a military person than that, right? Or, I didn't get a Purple Heart, or I didn't get a Bronze Star. We have all these labels and constructs that, we feel like makes us successful or not as successful from our military service, and I left the VA thinking kind of like I'm screwed here because nobody even understands what I'm going through. But that sense of loss for me, Shep, is what drove me to the work in the academic arena. It drove me to trying to figure out what was going on with me. And along that pathway, you know what I realized? Not only was I learning a language, I read a book in my second clinical residency called Reframing PTSD as Traumatic Grief. It's by Dr. Alan Wolfelt. Because, as a Cav Scout, you know what I had to be really good at? I had to be really good at making holes in people. And I had to be really good at, if I got a hole in me, figuring out where it was and filling it, because if I didn't, then, and what am I talking about? Awareness. If you're not aware of what you're struggling with and you don't have a language for it, it's really hard to identify. Right. That was the first time I read that book, and that was the first time I had a language for what I was suffering. I was suffering for a specific type of traumatic loss. A bulb went off. Now I had a language. Now I kind of understood I'd identified the hole. Now I needed to figure out how to fill it. So that became my passion through the residencies, through the academic arena. And then on the backside, I'm thinking, man, this is probably the reason a lot of people are blowing their brains out. Because what's wild is, as a suicide prevention specialist, and today I work on a suicide prevention team. That's what I do. My day job is I work on a suicide prevention team, and I facilitate moral injury groups and grief groups in the VA with groups of veterans, okay? My work outside the VA is no different. I work with suicide prevention, moral injury, and grief and loss. And so what I found in all those years of that work, right? People need companionship. They don't need to be treated. if you take the word treat patients in Latin and you break that down, the word treat means to drag, and a patient is a passive long-term sufferer. So if my goal when I meet you is to fix you or treat you, basically I'm dragging along a passive long-term sufferer. Now, I don't know about you. That doesn't sound very empowering, does it?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't sound like treatment. That's
no.
Let me drag you across the... Yeah.
No, right? But if you take the word companion, and that's what I do with people, I companion them. I don't ever meet somebody with some predetermined journey I think they need to go on. I love encountering veterans who are like, you're a chaplain? Ooh, I don't know if you can help me. I'm not religious. And I always say, well, you know what? I'm not either. And they're like, what? Yeah, they're like, what does that even mean? And the thing is I don't encounter someone with some predetermined journey I think they need to go on. I meet them where they are, and I want to walk with them where they feel like they need to go. And the reason language is so important and learning language is I don't need you to know my language. I need to learn your language, what you mean by what you say. Because if I'm going to help you, that's why it's important remember all the cool information they put on the dog tags? Right. Because if someone's B positive, you sure don't want to give them O negative blood. Well, if someone's struggling with grief, shame, pain, suffering, and all you're doing is trying to point them towards the positiveness that's ahead of them, listen, that might work in some instances, but there's some traumas that if you don't sit with someone where they are, you dismiss where they are. And if you do that with someone who's suffering moral injury, you're going after the symptom, you've missed the person, you've missed it all. And so in those situations where you're sitting with that person and they're telling you the deepest, darkest pain of their life, and you throw them a scripture, you dismiss where they're at, and you try and treat them, you're hurting them. You need to just sit with them. A lot of times, you know what? Just shut up. Just sit with them. Sit with them in their pain. The best thing you can tell somebody who's really suffering is I'm here. And if there's anything you need, I'm not going anywhere.
Just tell me the story.
Yeah.
Right?
When you're ready. Yeah. When you're ready, tell it to me.
What's unique about that, I know, and you attest to this too, is that most of the time, if there's a solution that's been made in my mind, right? I'll talk myself to it. You just got to be willing to listen to get me there, right?
Yeah.
And then reinforce the backside.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what I've done personally. Obviously, I'm not a clinician on that side of it, but I know that the most successful times whenever I'm speaking or allowing people to speak, they've already got the solution in their mind. I just need to allow them to get it out.
Yeah.
And let's rationalize it. And it sounds good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
It's
right?
Most of the time it's positive already. I don't need to reinforce that. You've already got the plan. I just need to get it out of you so that now when you speak it, we'll bring it to fruition, right? I mean,
you said something just so important right now, Shep. You said, I'm not a clinician. And you know what? You don't have to be.
Right? That's exactly
it's like you just have to be someone who's present.
I just care. Yeah.
Right? If you take the word companion, remember I broke down treat patients. If you take the word companion, calm is with, pan is bread. It's like sitting with someone breaking bread.
Right.
Listen, more work happens around a campfire, happens over a cup of coffee than any clinical space, especially with a veteran. Right. Because veterans are designed to be performance-driven and language-driven around that, right? From the time you put on a uniform, you're being evaluated. And so you take a veteran and you set them in a clinical space, they automatically take on that mindset of, oh, I'm being evaluated. So I've got to, I've got to say the right things. I've got to do the right things. It's very hard to be authentic and honest in those situations. But you get them outside of that arena, on a couch, out in the woods, around a campfire, man, let me tell you something. All of that stuff, it's not present. You create an atmosphere. You create the type of clinical office that, guess what? You don't have to be a clinician for. Right. All you have to do is someone to be willing to listen to what's going on.
So with all of that, I mean, obviously just in speaking about moral injury, PTSD, that ties in, we speak briefly about sitting around a campfire, right? And how breaking down, just sitting around a campfire opens up every single veteran that we've ever come in contact with. And you've witnessed this thousands of times like myself, that in speaking about where they are, giving them the space to be able to speak to us is where our events, and obviously why we're partnered so strongly in this scenario, because our hearts are where, together in this, is that we want to provide, Eagle Ops wants to provide that safe space of that fun activity. We do a lot of outdoor events as well, obviously. But just in general, the social events that we focus on is saying, hey, brother, hey, sister, come and join us. Let's enjoy whatever this event is. Doesn't matter what it is. And give them an opportunity to have a safe space to come and connect, be around other veterans that have been there and done that. And through that event, it's like the touch points. Obviously we talked about this earlier, I'm not a clinician on this side of it. The more touches that I can get you to, the more connections that we can make, the more opportunities that me and you can see eye to eye. I've been there. I've done that. I've been to boot camp. I went overseas. I did this. I did that. Yeah. Man, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're like BFFs because we've done a lot of the same stuff. We've been there. We understand each other. And then from that, man, sitting around that campfire, just staring at a fire and telling a story opens that kind of vulnerability switch, right? And when that switch goes, man, veterans are like, brah, like sometimes it's the full-on story. Now obviously we have the combat-related stories and all of that, but, the vast majority of those stories, obviously PTSD, moral injury, all of those things are connected through this. And you hear a ton of those, but when they start being vulnerable and telling their story, I don't know that I've ever heard a single story of a veteran that it didn't come back to or a connection with a battle buddy. Yeah. Right? Your story's the same. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Protecting a battle buddy. So come on. Every single one of them that I know of on that side of it. So our space, Eagle Ops wise, social events, get veterans out, connect with other veterans so that we can then say, hey, brother, we're here for you. We understand. We've been there. We've done that. Yeah. How can we help? Yeah. Right? Is it just sitting around and having a cup of coffee and chatting, or is it sitting around the campfire? Like that's the focus for us, right? Yeah. Just creating those safe spaces to say, hey, brother, hey, sister, come and join us. Yeah. Like we're here to listen and help. And I know my claim to fame on that side is I'm like, I want to connect them with every resource out there. But sometimes I overlook the fact that we're probably one of the biggest resources just to say, hey, we're here, right? Come on. Yeah. Just come and join us. So I really feel like that with our mission statement, connecting relationships, right, to resources to bring our heroes home. Yeah. That we live it, eat it, breathe it, because the relationship is what opens the door for everything else. Yeah. That relationship is the trust and the camaraderie, that battle buddy mentality that, hey, brother, no matter what's going on, the simplest thing, bro, I got a flat tire. Okay. You got a jack? Nope. Okay, I'll be there in a second, Yeah. All the way to obviously more injury and just mental things that we're dealing with. All of those we can help with if we have the relationship. Yeah. Right? Because you're not going to ask me or any of us if we don't have that connection. Yeah. And so I really feel like with everything that we do is, at least from my heart and Jessica's heart, is that's our focus is, the fun events. We do a lot of those. But the reality of it is I want to see the connections, right? When I go to these events, like I want to make that personal connection. And I don't get a whole lot of time to do that so much all the time now, but that's what we focus on, and I think that's where the real key to our success is that, hey, number one, we care. It's not that we're creating the events. We actually care. We want to make that connection, connecting relationships. The resources, man, they're out there. We just got to ask the right question or connect to someone who can open that door, right?
When I did a meta-analysis on 94 different research projects that connected loneliness to suicidality, and let me tell you what I found. Loneliness is the worst risk factor that exists. The top two are isolation and loneliness, okay? Now, not all isolation is bad. Sometimes you need to isolate. Some people call it solitude, whatever that is. Sometimes you need to step away, move away. Sometimes I need to do that when I'm angry. I need like a minute, right?
Probably should do it more often.
And so isolation, I think, at its root only becomes bad when it becomes an avoidance tool, which a lot of veterans settle into, right? But loneliness is different. Loneliness is introspective. You can't look across a room and see who's lonely. So let me tell you what rally points do, Shep. You ready for this? Rally points interrupt the wrong imagination that people have built about themselves. Most people that experience bad things, they are living in the worst interpretation of themselves. And when you don't get around other people, you live in that, okay?
Right.
Now, in that meta-analysis, the way you counteract isolation and loneliness, there's only one way: community and connection. So when you create rally points, you are interrupting that individual's worst interpretation that they have of themselves. When I talk about moral health, because if you have moral injury, that's an injury to whatever makes you morally healthy. And when I say the word moral, let's not attach religion to it. It's a human thing, right? But what happens is your moral imagination, that place that you can go to, that you can think of a better future, that you can think of a life where you're not suffering, that you can think of a life where you don't think the worst thing about yourself, that needs to be restored. And so when you go to a rally point and you start to build community and connection, you're interrupting that negative interpretation. Now, maybe the first time out, you're not completely there where your imagination is back to like, oh yeah, I can see a future. But if you keep showing up, it's going to keep getting interrupted. You're going to keep feeling a connection. You're going to start to not just feel the connection, you're going to start to build a relationship. And that's all you need to overcome the worst things of your life. Now listen, I say healing is not forgetting, it's remembering differently. That's what I mean. You're interrupting the terrible loop that you have that shame tells you, oh, you're a terrible person. You sucked as a Marine. You were a terrible Cav Scout. I mean, look at you. You're a bad shot now. Let me tell you, listen, when somebody comes to a rally point to shoot a gun outside of a sustained combat situation, that interrupts the loop of, man, I really like to shoot, but I used to have to shoot at people or be shot at. Right. When you go to a rally point and you hit a golf ball, now listen, I might not be the greatest golfer, but one thing's for sure. I can't think about what happened in my past or what's ahead of me. I better be looking at that ball right there in front of me to do it. So that's the thing. You're remembering differently because you're interrupting that terrible negative loop that you have about yourself, that shame's trying to tell you about yourself, that you're unworthy. And here's the bad part. Loneliness is what we call a motivational phase factor. It's like pouring gas on a fire. It's like when the firing pin hits the powder in a bullet, combustion. That's what I want you to think about when you think about what causes someone to become suicidal. It's loneliness. Right. And rally points interrupt loneliness. They destroy that understanding that I am alone. And when you feel like people are around you that are going to support you, they show up, bro, you're on your way. All it takes is just a little bit. You know, some people might say, well, isn't moral imagination or restorative imagination, isn't that just hope? Yes, it is. And all you need is a little bit of hope for tomorrow to stop worrying about yesterday. Because the reality is you're never going to forget what happened. Somebody said a long time ago, time heals all wounds. That person needed to be smacked right in the face, okay? Because time doesn't heal all wounds. As a matter of fact, some people are going to carry the residue of a wound your entire life, but it doesn't have to own you. And you know what? It's a lot better to carry a wound with someone than it is to carry it by yourself.
Right. So I'd say that I absolutely love you, brother. Like every time that we get together, I get to learn something, right? And I know that you've been around me for years and you know and understand where my heart is on this. And I'm never the doctorate. So like I don't have the clinical side of things, but we do see eye to eye because I'm doing exactly what your book says works. right?
Yeah.
I just don't have the fancy words behind it, right? Making connection, doing the things that we need to do. You hit the nail on the head. I've got so many stories, obviously, of veterans over the years that have finally opened up to us, both moral injury side, PTSD side of things, but that hope side of things. Like, we both know that loneliness and isolation is what we're combating, right? Making connection combats both of those, right? If we make true connection, we can combat loneliness and isolation. We say it all the time. Rally Point's 100%. That's our focus. Create the opportunity to be able to build the rapport, the relationship, the connection, so that we can break down those barriers and open up that opportunity. But we've had, hundreds of veterans come to us now. And what you just said really has hit a chord with me, which is not uncommon in speaking to you, honestly. But we had a veteran that's come to us about 8 years ago. And he said that in speaking of shooting, he came to our freedom shoots. And we had an opportunity. One of our difference makers gave him one of our Reach One More cards and said, hey, we got a shooting event. If you're interested in shooting, you should come. Yeah. And he showed up for the first time. And I know you know the story and who this individual is, but he showed up. And that particular event was the first win that he had had in 10 years after service, right? The first win. But the unique thing about that first win gave him hope that it's the positive turn. And just what you said, and I'm going to say it a little differently. Yeah. He changed his perspective, right? The way he viewed the issue that he was dealing with mentally, right? So he changed his perspective. Now I've got a hope. I've got, man, this is my first win in 10 years. I've got a positive light. Mm-hmm. But now I got a new mission because I got to come back next month and do it again. Because I won this one. Now I get a chance to go and do it again. Purpose, right? That's it. Connecting the dots. So he comes back, obviously, in the story. We'll get into this later because he's going to be one of our very strong testimonies. Yeah. But he won the next one, and he's our very first champion of our Freedom Shoots event. Yeah. But since then, absolutely changed his perspective, has changed his life in a single win and a single opportunity because we made the connection. One of our difference makers made the connection. Yeah. He steps out and makes the connection, then produces the win, right? Like one spark leads to, now he's got a mission to get to the next one, and then he wins it, and now everything changes. Yeah. You know, his perspective in life changed dramatically. And to just think that just before that, he was thinking about ending his life. That's right. It was. And that's the thing, right? He tells a story. Yeah. Listen, Eagle Ops is saving lives, Shep. We don't need a lot of statistical data to prove that. We got it all. Because the number one way to combat isolation and loneliness is to create community and connection. Right? You don't. We're proving it every day. Here's the problem. All the statistical data that we have around suicide comes from the CDC, and it's always 2 years late. Right. It's always 2 years old. After the fact. You know what? It only tells us what causes people to die. It doesn't tell us what causes people to live. Got that. Yeah. And as a suicide prevention specialist, which you are too, I might be in the professional arena, right, and have the degree, but you're also a suicide prevention specialist as well. And let me tell you how you are. You're standing in the gap. Nobody cares if you have a degree when they're ready to blow their brains out. Right. All they care is someone going to show up? Is someone going to help change the negative loop that's going on in my head? Yeah. Is someone going to stand by my side, help carry the burden that I'm carrying? And you know what? Presence is the best medicine. You don't need to be a pharmacist to prescribe that. Right. You just have to be someone who shows up. And that's what Eagle Ops does. Every single time you have a rally point. I wish that we had all the statistical data from people who were going to blow their brains out 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, to see what is causing them to live. Like, what are the reasons? But we don't have it. Right. We don't have it. We need it, which is part of the reason that I'm going gangbusters to, some of my academic arenas and support around data to get that. Because if we only stop
people from killing themselves and we don't show them reasons to live, you know what we keep doing? We just keep stopping them from dying.
Right.
But suicide survivors, those that are left after someone dies by suicide, they're 175% more likely to die by suicide. So when that veteran takes their life, their children, those immediately connected to them, and by the way, there's 135 people directly connected to every suicide death. So when we save a life, we're not just saving that life, we're saving generational lives. So think about that for a second. Saving lives. I don't know if there's anything more important than that. Because as long as someone's alive, guess what? They get to write how their story ends.
Right.
And Eagle Ops is helping people write their stories.
Man, brother, that's we're getting deep into it now. This is a great point, great kind of stopping point for us to end our part one of this segment and move into part two. But what an amazing conversation as far as that goes. Getting deep into it, knowing and understanding that connection is what we built. Everything that we've done at Eagle Ops is built around connection, getting veterans out, connected to veterans. I say it all the time, connected to other veterans. I don't say resources, I say other veterans. Now, as we well know, battle buddies, right? In the military, who did you call whenever you needed something? You called the brother that you knew was going to answer the phone and would get in just as much trouble with you, if not lead the way. But he was the one, or she was the one that you could call on. And that is our sole mission, right? It's not just in our mission statement, connecting relationships to resources. Yep. The relationship comes from us connecting those veterans to veterans. The resources come from each one of us. We all have different experiences in life and connections, and everything we just talked about. Like it's that connection that's going to build that bridge, give that opportunity, and more so give you that better perspective to be able to change the way you look at whatever that situation that is, that's ailing you, that's causing the issue. And if we can do that, then we're going to be in a much better situation. And truly, between me and you, and I know that me and you, mine and your hearts are definitely on this side of it, that the way to stop and end veteran suicide is to do just that. Let's create community just like we had in the military and say, hey, brother, hey, sister, we're here for you. What's going on? How can we help?
Yes.
And when brass tacks, like when it comes time, answer the phone and be there, right?
That's it, 100%.
So thank you guys all for listening today's first segment with Dr. Carter Check. I appreciate you, brother, for coming out. And
my pleasure.
Please follow us, subscribe on all of our social media platforms. Go to eagleops.org, connect with us, come and join us at the next rally point. Subscribe at or wherever you're watching your local podcast at. Subscribe on those YouTube podcasts. We are releasing this on a weekly basis, so please subscribe and join us for the next part 2 and meet us at the rally point.